The Void.
So Craig Reed, the Christian Response, has this video that I'm going to address here. But before I do, I want to talk a little bit about the void. What that idea means for me. And I'll talk about it by reflecting on a point after my deconversion, when I stopped believing in God. And for some time after that, I had nightmares about dying. In the past, I've had nightmares about dying while I was a Christian. But what would happen is if I got killed in the dream, I would still be there as a spirit or a ghost. There was one that I remember vividly where this van was barreling towards me and boom, and my body's flown away, but I'm still there in the middle of the van as it continues to pass through me. And of course, I wake up screaming, as you would expect from a nightmare. But now that I didn't believe, flash forward to when this series of nightmares occurred, I would dream of like falling to my death or something happening. It didn't even necessarily have any specific thing, but I just knew that my life was somehow being terminated. And there would just be black, just nothing. And I jolt awake, sometimes screaming. And eventually these nightmares went away. And what I realized as I looked into this, my brain was simply trying to figure out reality, as it now had to readjust to the new reality that I was telling it was real. You see, before, I had told my brain that there was an afterlife. So if I died in a dream, then there would be an afterlife. There'd be a spirit. There'd still be a me to witness what was going on. But now, without God, this also meant no afterlife. Although I didn't actively think about that, my subconscious must have been thinking about this and latched onto the idea of dead is dead. And that's it. There is no you. How are we going to process this? How are we going to think about nothing? So these nightmares were a response of my subconscious, my brain, trying to sort through the reality of there not being an afterlife and what that would be like. Well, it wouldn't be like anything. It's like I wasn't aware of the 1900s. Why would I be aware of the year 9000? Although I'd love to still be around, science would have to do something fantastic for that to happen. So the only thing that you can really try to compare it to is fainting or getting put under for surgery. So right before you go into the surgery, you're counting down or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're in another room, and the time in between just isn't there. There's nothing there. You aren't there. There's nothing to remember. You were there one moment and then you weren't, and that's all you know. And you kind of know that it's done, but you kind of don't. You're like, what? Okay, well, And so, what was that middle like? There wasn't anything there. And the same thing for when you faint. There's just nothing there. There's nothing to be aware of. So there's no point during that time when you can feel afraid or anything else, because there is no you. But now, we're here now. And to try to wrap our heads around what it's like to not be, we can't really do it. But that's my version of the void. The nothingness that we will one day all inevitably fall into, whether we want to or not, or like it or not. It's just the way that things appear to be. I could be wrong, but I don't see any evidence that I am wrong. I think that if we want to live long, time, that's great. We got to do the science for it. If we're going to have any sort of, quote, afterlife, quote, it's going to be done by preserving the brain. And I don't see any other way to do it, because you are effectively your brain. You're a little bit more than that. Your spinal column and some nerves as well, but most of you is your brain. That's the only void that I really would ponder about. And I don't think that there's an answer. There isn't a solution, it just is. I think that religion pretends to have an answer and says, there's more to it. You're not really dead. Death is an illusion of some sort. And that's, I suppose, comforting. But if it's not true, then it's not true. And no matter how comforting it is, it's still not true. On to the video.
The void, two-pronged. One is in personal, and the other is in the collective. One is in the individual, and the other is in the collective. In the individual, the void is philosophical and existential. In the collective, it is a set of shared beliefs. Now, I think these two are strongly interdependent. Matter of fact, I'm almost certain of it.
So this is his definition of this concept that he has labeled, for whatever reason, the void. He says it's two-pronged. The first prong being that there's an individual, and there's a philosophical and existential part of this. And then the second prong is the collective, which is a set of shared beliefs. And both of these prongs are somehow intertwined to form the concept of the void.
All atheism means is a lack of belief in God. Okay, that is not a philosophy of forward momentum.
That's correct. Because what you're looking for here, I submit, is a worldview. And atheism is not a worldview, nor should it be taken to be a worldview. Although some apologists have tried to say that atheism is a worldview, no, it's part of a worldview, perhaps, but it is not something that forms a worldview. It's a part of you if you don't believe in God, but it is not the whole of you. I guess one way to put it would be that you don't believe in leprechauns. You probably don't even give them a second or first thought. But that's not who you are. That doesn't tell us much about you. It's not a philosophy of forward momentum. Not believing in leprechauns, a leprechaunist, doesn't mean anything. It's just a statement about you. It doesn't really tell me, the outside agent, anything more about you than you happen to not believe in leprechauns. And for whatever reason, you've made this to be an important issue and topic for you because other people believe in leprechauns and you're worried about them or their actions or inactions because of their beliefs. You're worried about what laws they will pass or try to get passed, or maybe you're just worried that people believe in things that aren't really real. Or maybe you just find the topic of leprechauns interesting to talk about. Whatever the reason is, you have declared your set title, you're labeled to be a leprechaunist, to let those that believe in leprechauns know that you don't believe in those, and you want to talk about that. You'd like to debate it. You'd like to study it. You'd like to do all sorts of things about it, but none of it addresses anything else other than that one particular thing. Either this thing is or isn't. Are there leprechauns or not? That's all you're interested in, and that's all we know that you're interested in, at least as far as that title goes. You might be interested in a variety of other things, and your philosophy and worldview may be any number of things, and we have no idea unless we ask you.
All atheism means is a lack of belief in God. Now, herein lies the potential problem. I'm not saying it's an unsolvable problem, but you need to look at the problem squarely, and that problem is the void. And like I said, you're still avoiding it.
Well, I won't avoid the void. Well, that's fun to say. Avoid the void. Avoid the noid. That was what was that? Pizza commercial. I don't remember. Anyways, so there's this concept that you've come up with, and that there's an existential or philosophical crisis that then leads into a set of shared beliefs among people or whatever. Okay. And so, how is that let's just say it is a problem of some sort. Let's tentatively grant that. And to that, I just say, so what? Well, it's like, well, you haven't addressed it. In what way do you want it to be addressed? Well, atheism hasn't addressed this. Atheism can't address it because it's not a worldview. It's not a religion. It's not a philosophy. It's simply part of a person. It is not the whole. Well, but that's a problem. Why? Because, well, God addresses that question. Does it? Does God really address this question? Maybe it does, but maybe it doesn't. It depends on who you ask. And it depends on what a person means by God. Maybe God doesn't address this question and simply gives the illusion of addressing this question. What then?
Oh, the depth psychology today, the research, ding, 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 the research of today strongly suggests or strongly indicates, again, I didn't say Jesus spoke to my heart, and therefore people need a philosophy of forward momentum, did I? Did I say I was praying one night and Jesus said people need a philosophy of forward momentum? Did I say that? No. I said the research strongly suggests, the psychological research strongly suggests, evidence strongly suggests that people need, not saying want, people need, didn't say they would strongly desire, people need a philosophy of forward momentum.
Citation would be required. It does no good to say that there are all these nebulous studies out there that all happen to agree with you without listing those studies. Who did them and when? Have they been peer reviewed? Have they been cited more than once? Are they up to date? Etc., etc. And that's an awful big burden to bear, but you would have to bear that burden if you want to say, well, I've got all this evidence. It's out there. Go look for it. I'm not going to provide it. It's just out there. No. You're going to have to prove that these studies exist. And also be intellectually honest in showing counterexamples to those studies or anything else that might negate those studies. All to prove that people need a philosophy of a way forward. Okay? Maybe you could change that and say that you believe that people need a philosophy of a way forward. Then you would remove yourself from the burden and the citations that you would have to otherwise give. I think that it's fairly clear, at least from my point of view, and I could be wrong, that we have basic needs of food and water, shelter and clothing, and perhaps the feeling of safety and so on. And we might also want to add to that, we need a community, we need other people besides ourselves. But once those basic needs are met, then I do believe that people begin to do philosophy. They start to question why we're here or what we're here for or what the bleep are we going to do with any of this, how do we treat other people, and so on and so forth. So once the basic needs are met, then we can do philosophy because we have time to do it, because we have time to think about it. Now, do people need motivation? Do they need a philosophy of a way forward? Maybe they do. I don't know. I'm going to tentatively grant that all people need a philosophy of a way forward. And what would that philosophy be? It's a good question to ask. There's plenty of options out there to select from. My label of skeptic doesn't really tell you a lot. Even this Carl Sagan's baloney detection kit doesn't really cover what I think skepticism is, but it gives you kind of a very basic idea of skepticism. It means to investigate, but doubt first, but to investigate. For me, that's what skepticism is. To doubt because, well, people can lie and things can be wrong, and because we can be wrong, because I can be wrong, because things might seem to be fine, but maybe they're not. And I want to know what is really real. Not just what I want to believe is real or think is real or hope is real. I want to know what is really real as close as I can get to that. And whatever it is that I can use to get there is what I want to use. But that doesn't tell you anything more about my philosophy of a way forward, or even if I necessarily have one. I might be the person that doesn't need one, perhaps. A counterexample to you're suggesting that all people need this, or a large majority of people need this. I don't know that I need it. I don't know if I have it or not. But if I was to have one, it would not come from the word atheist, and I don't know if I could extract it from the word skeptic either, or logic, even though I value logic a whole lot. A way forward, not what, a reason to get up in the morning? Because I like existing, I suppose, because I'm hungry, because I have to go to the bathroom. I mean, there's any number of reasons to get out of bed in the morning. Because I want to face the challenges of the day and bring some order to chaos. Because why not? I want to see my favorite show. I want to talk to this person again. I want to upload another video. I want to make another video. There's all sorts of micro reasons for me to exist from day to day. But none of them are, in and of themselves, the reason to move forward. Maybe I just don't need one. I don't know, honestly. But if somebody else does need one, I don't know what I'd advise them. The way forward is sometimes the way back.
Something that inspires you to move forward in the morning. You wake up, you don't feel like facing a day. This is a difficult world with lots of challenges in it. Why do you get up and move forward in the morning?
This is almost too easy. I mean, really, I could give an answer to this. And you all know, if you've watched my content for a while, you know what my answer would be. You know! You have to know what my answer would be. Oh, come on. Don't pretend like you don't know what the answer I would give to this is. You know what it is. You know what I want to say, what I'm thinking of very strongly right now. It's like, I could just say that one word, and that would be the word. And that's what I would do. I would just say that as the response to this. But Craig, he's like, what the bleep is deconverted man talking about? I have no idea. But the rest of you absolutely know what I'm referring to. And if you do know, put it in the comment below with exclamation points and stuff. And the first one to do that gets the thing that you did that with as a trophy, I guess.
Now, I analyzed Shannon as, having reservoirs of emotional resilience in her, having some emotional health. I think my analysis of her is correct. She's got it pretty together, but I didn't get it right. I took an educated guess as to how she got that way. It wasn't a stable family life. Stable family lives usually provide that. They put strength inside of you. That's why a lot of people from broken homes have real struggles in life, because nobody put that strength inside of them. It doesn't just appear inside of a human being.
I didn't know that you could analyze people. That's kind of interesting. I mean, I know I can analyze arguments, but analyze people? How? How did you do that? Like psychologically? Like just based on what knowledge of psychology did you use? Philosophically? It doesn't matter, you were wrong anyway, so... but yeah, other than that weird bit of analyzing somebody and like, oh, okay, well, they have a good emotional support system or whatever, it's that what makes you tick kind of question. Like, I need to figure out, like, how is it that this person doesn't have what I have and they're still able to get up in the morning? Like, what motivates them? because it's very easy to think that without a God, well, that's my motivation. So how can they possibly do it without that? Well, if they've never had God growing up, and they never knew about God until just recently, like Johnny Drive-By, he's going to have other things that he's going to have had to rely on to be some sort of motivator. But as far as it doesn't come from inside, or it could never come from inside, based on what? What studies have you looked at to show that that's true? What information do you have that I don't have? Or is this another belief statement that you're making? Maybe you believe that nobody can just self-generate a motive to get up in the morning and say, you know what? I'm going to hold myself up by the bootstraps and I'm going to get out there and I'm going to make a difference in the world. Not because anybody told me, not because of a supernatural experience, not because of anything, other than just I want to do it. Now's the day. Today is the day. I'm going to be that better person. Just because. Why not? How in the world would you know that there wasn't anyone that's ever done that without study or something to indicate that? And I suspect if you were to look into it, you'd find that maybe it's the minority of people that have done it on their own. Okay, well then what? Well, then that makes your claim somewhat faulty, doesn't it? It somewhat negates this question of, well, what are we going to do about this thing that I'm wondering about, this void? And I'm wondering why you're wondering about it. Are you trying to put yourself in the shoes of the atheist and be like, well, what would I be like as an atheist? What would it feel like? What would that mean to me? What would it be to not believe in God? Because God is such a central core part of who I am that trying to imagine myself without that is just impossible. And I can speak from my own experience. If you had asked Infinite Hope, which is who I went by when I was a Christian, what it would be like to not be a Christian, I would be like, I don't know. But I did test it. And this is what I did. I did a little bit of experiments. I pretended to be an atheist, and I went into Christian chat rooms, live chat rooms, talks, that weren't on YouTube at the time. YouTube didn't have that capability yet. And I just acted like I didn't even know about God. I just pretended that I had no concept of God. I put on a really funny accent, and I pretended to be from the Middle East or whatever. And I wanted somebody to explain to me this God thing, as if I'd never heard of it before coming here. And, my first interaction is, I'm new to the internet, and yeah, it was a lot of claims I had to make to do the experiment, and maybe you wouldn't feel right about being deceptive, I don't know. But this is what I did, and I experimented. Now, it's a very low-yield experiment because there's only a handful of people. But what I saw was that the explanation of God as the outsider makes zero coherent sense. The salvation story, all of that makes no sense as an outsider. There are so many claims that are made one after the other that each of those claims has to be proven and understood, and you can't prove them, and understanding them or explaining to them somebody is extraordinarily difficult if they've never encountered it before. I also experimented in other different ways of pretending to be atheist. In fact, I called myself finite despair, because I thought that was the inverse of infinite hope, was finite despair. And I interacted with this guy. He used to be pretty big on YouTube, called Shaka God, and he was just a jerk. And I realized that the atheists were pretty nice. They were really I was like, I don't understand. This guy's supposed to be a Christian. He's supposed to be a good person. But, you know, some people are just jerks, whether they be atheist or theist or Christian or whatever. Some people are just jerks. Sometimes I can be a jerk. Only a few times. Don't look at those videos where I was a jerk. Just pretend those didn't happen. It's okay when I do it. But, you know, that doesn't mean the position is true or false. It just means the person's a jerk. Okay. But when I pretended to be an outsider, and when I saw how it's almost impossible to explain anything about the Bible or Jesus or God to somebody that's never encountered these ideas, that lent a little bit of doubt to me at the time. And I really realized that this is a bubble that I had been living in for quite some time, and that it was time to get out of that bubble a bit. And I was still a Christian after I did those experiments. So if you do something similar, let me know your results. Maybe you'll even document it for our, because that would be interesting. I was going to say for our amusement, but that sounds like the wrong thing to say. I don't want that to come out the wrong way. Even though I just said it, so never mind now. I could edit it, not going to. Moving on.
The evidence strongly suggests, the psychological evidence strongly suggests that human beings need tools for emotional resilience. Now, let me just point out, crystal clear, so we're 100% clear on this. Christianity solves deeply. If you say God doesn't exist, fine, but you cannot deny the evidence. Christianity, practiced correctly and practiced appropriately, gives you really, really, really powerful tools of emotional resilience. Powerful tools of emotional resilience.
I am interested in the logical point of No True Scotsman that sneaks in there, that if you practice it the right way, then Christianity gives you these tools. See, this is an easy out, so that if I point to a Christian that's suffering and having a hard time of it, well, they're just not practicing Christianity the right way. Yeah, maybe they are, and they just aren't getting the same result as you are. Maybe that's possible. But I'll leave that kind of to the side and just say, so what? Even if it's true that this provides it, well, so can a cult, so can any other religion, so can any other thing, and so what? What's your point? It doesn't make it true. It doesn't make it real. It doesn't make it anything other than perhaps, at best, useful. A useful delusion is still a delusion. And maybe it's useful, maybe it's beneficial, maybe it's helpful, but it's still not true. I'm concerned primarily with what's true or not true. As far as finding a philosophy of a way forward, you might have and you might have thought that it is found in Christianity. And you might think that there's some way to show that as an argument. But you haven't done that here, because you would have to show across the board, at least the majority of times, that Christianity in and of itself produces this sort of outcome, and that other things don't produce a similar outcome in a similar way or as well. That Christianity is better at doing it than any other system. Then you might have the beginnings of an argument of some sort. But right now, you haven't given us any citation whatsoever for any of these studies that you're throwing out there as being done. You're saying that Christianity provides this way. That's another claim that would have to be supported with argumentation and evidence, and you've provided none of that here. So maybe it worked for you, but that doesn't mean it works for everyone else. And again, that little point where you can kind of go weasel around a bit by saying, well, it has to be practiced the right way. Well, practice the right way. Meditation can lead you to have serenity. Practice the wrong way, it's not going to work. Okay, yeah, well, what does that mean? Who decides what's the right way? You? There's lots of Christians with lots of ways of thinking about doing things. The snake handler Christians, for example, think that you must dance with snakes. And that even though they think that you won't get bitten, they also think that if you do get bitten, that the poison won't affect you if you're a true believer. So if you do get infected with the poison and it hurts you, obviously you weren't really a true believer. Your faith faltered in that moment. And if you die, well, you weren't a believer. You just didn't have enough faith. Okay. Of course, taking anti-venom and building up an immunity to those bites might be a good idea. But, eventually the evolution of this, of what happens in that is that people do get bit all the time, and they do build up an immunity to it, or they die. I mean, one or the other is true. So it's like, yeah, I am not affected by these bites. Well, not anymore. You've been bitten a bunch. Or maybe you had a natural immunity. I don't know. But it's not proven by the system, because there's a flaw in the thinking that if I do it right, then I should be able to dance around with these snakes and they'll never bite me, or if they do bite me, the venom will not affect me. And if the venom affects me, then I wasn't doing it the right way. Well, there is another cause, perhaps, and so this is a fallacy of the single cause, that there can only be one reason why it's affecting you or not affecting you. Similarly, Christianity may or may not work on its own in isolation. You might need a community, and it is the community of other people that are helping you to be a better person, rather than the religion itself. And that you could get the same result by joining any other club or any other community effort, rather than just religion. But you would need ample studies to show that it can only happen in Christianity, and or that it happens better in Christianity than anywhere else, for it to even begin the beginning of some sort of argument that says I should care even if it's true. Because it's like, yeah, and we could probably find it other places. What's your point?
Ability to conquer challenging and difficult situations. That is one of the benefits of faith, not the downside of, hey, believing something without evidence. It also gives you strength in difficult circumstances.
Sir, it might give you strength in difficult circumstances. But that doesn't mean it gives all people strength in difficult circumstances. I don't need faith to have strength. That's me. It might work for you, it might work for somebody else, but I don't need faith. My strength comes from me, nowhere else.
That there is a strongly interdependent relationship between a void in the individual and a void in the collective.
Well, that's what your claim is. But as far as making a coherent argument for that claim, you have not done that. As far as any evidence, you haven't presented any. Any tests that we could run? I haven't heard of anything that you suggested for that, so I could end the video here and say we should be skeptical of your conclusions, because you haven't given me one of the three things that I've always required to think that something is true, which is empirical evidence, repeatable test, and or valid and sound argument. You haven't given us that. You've alluded to tests that are out there, maybe. You've alluded to this idea that you've come up with, this void concept. As far as I can tell, that's your idea. You've alluded that this is a problem that you want to see addressed, and that hasn't been addressed. And you've complained that atheism isn't a way to address it. That's correct, because atheism is not a worldview. It's not going to be the solution to any particular problem of ideas like this, and nor should it be seen that way. And you might say, well, but there's benefits to faith in that if I hope that tomorrow is better, that might be a benefit. There might be some benefit. Hope is powerful, sure. But rather than hope that tomorrow is better, I can want to make tomorrow better. And you might say, well, how do you do that? Surely you have to believe in yourself. That's something that you have to believe in. Maybe. Or maybe I can say, well, I'll do my best, I'll do my darndest, and we'll see how it turns out. And I don't have to believe in myself to want to see how it turns out. But that's me. That might not be somebody else. We'd have to take massive surveys of people, and poll collecting in that sort of way is a complicated matter. Getting the data for that, whew, man. Somebody might have done something like this already, but finding an adequate data source, that's going to be a nightmare. Making sure that the poll is correctly done, that's another nightmare. So this argument is a ginormous burden of proof on you, since you're the one that's making these claims. Now, you can avoid some of that by just saying, I believe this and I believe that, and I think this and I think that, and this has helped me, and stuff like this. But your argument's all over the map, and it's incoherent and not well formatted. So there's a lot to clean up here. The core of this is a search for meaning or purpose or reason to move forward. And throughout all this, I was thinking of a song. I'm not very good at singing, but I'll give it a try. Everybody's looking for that something. One thing that makes it all complete. You'll find it in the strangest places. Places you never knew it could be. Some find it in the face of their children. Some find it in their lover's eyes. Who can deny the joy it brings when you found that special thing? You're flying without wings. Some find it in sharing every morning. Some in their solitary lives. You might find it in the words of others, a simple line that can make you laugh or cry. You'll find it in the deepest friendships, the kind that you cherish all your life. And when you know how much that means, you've found that special thing. You're flying without wings. So impossible as they may seem, you've got to fight for every dream. 'Cause who's to know which one you let go would have made you complete? Well, oh, wait, where did everyone go? Come back, come back. Oh. Lobster. Lobster was the answer, dang it. Lobster.